Your contract is terminated, the regional head said, not looking up. I calmly handed my federal clearance papers to the military liaison beside him. He glanced down, then froze. His eyes shot to the head. Sir, the funding, secure the site immediately. Now. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as the color drained from Robert Hutchinson's face. The man who just fired me now looked like his entire career had flashed before his eyes. The military liaison, Colonel James Wright, had gone completely still, his fingers gripping my clearance documentation like it might explode. Stories like these happen more often than most people realize. This is what happens when corporate arrogance meets federal accountability. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where workplace justice isn't just a dream, it's documented reality. If stories of accountability resonate with you, consider subscribing. The support helps bring more of these stories forward. And together we're building toward that 7,000 subscriber milestone. Every subscription matters. My name is Sophia Hartwell. And at the time this happened, I held the position of Senior Systems Integration Specialist with TS/SCI clearance. I came from a background that taught me to value every person's contribution, regardless of title. My parents ran a community center in Ohio, and they showed me early on that empathy isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That foundation shaped everything about how I approached my work and the people around me. The contract termination happened on a Wednesday morning in March. I'd been at TechCorp Defense Solutions for 18 months, embedded in their classified systems division. The facility sat in a nondescript office park outside Arlington, Virginia, the kind of place that looked like any other tech company from the outside but required 3 separate security checkpoints to actually enter. Robert Hutchinson had been promoted to Regional Operations Director about 6 weeks earlier. He came from the commercial side of the business, a man who'd spent his career trimming margins and eliminating what he considered redundant expenses. He carried that particular brand of confidence that comes from success in one arena convincing someone they understand every arena. His first company-wide email had been about streamlining operations and maximizing resource efficiency. Translation: he planned to cut positions and renegotiate contracts. Those of us on the classified side traded uneasy looks, figuring federal oversight gave us some measure of protection. We were wrong. Or rather, I was wrong about how far someone would go without grasping what they were actually cutting. The meeting had been scheduled with just 12 hours' notice. Contract review session. The calendar invite read. No agenda, no prep materials, just a time and a room number. I arrived at 8:30 sharp. The conference room was one of the smaller ones. Beige walls, a table for 8. A window overlooking the parking lot. Robert sat at the head, laptop open, barely acknowledging me. Colonel Wright sat at his right in uniform, visibly uncomfortable. Miss Hartwell, Robert began, eyes still on his screen. Thank you for coming. This will be brief. I set my bag down and stayed on my feet. Something in his tone told me sitting would be a mistake. After reviewing our contracted personnel costs, I've determined that your position represents an inefficient allocation of resources. Your skill set, while specialized, can be covered by redistributing responsibilities among existing staff. He finally looked up, his expression carefully neutral. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. HR will process your final payment and handle exit procedures. The words sat in the air. Colonel Wright shifted in his seat, jaw tight. I see, I said evenly. And the classified systems integration for Project Sentinel, that's being reassigned? Robert waved a hand. The team will absorb those duties. Mitchell has a background in systems work, and Claudia has her security clearance. Between the two of them, continuity will be maintained. Mitchell's background in systems work amounted to a 2-week coding bootcamp 3 years prior. Claudia's clearance sat at the secret level, 2 full tiers below what Sentinel required. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd started carrying to every meeting since Robert took over. Inside sat my federal clearance papers, my project authorization documents, and my direct appointment letter from the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Before we finalize anything, I said, voice level, I think Colonel Wright should review these. I slid the folder across the table. The colonel opened it, eyes moving across the first page, then the second. His posture changed entirely, shoulders squaring, his expression hardening into something between alarm and anger. Robert noticed. What is it? Colonel Wright didn't answer him. He looked at me instead. Miss Hartwell, is this documentation current as of this week? Yes, sir. Updated Monday. He flipped to the third page and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. When he spoke, his voice dropped into a register I recognized from my military family members, the tone reserved for catastrophe. Sir, he said, finally addressing Robert. Sir, the funding, secure the site immediately. Now. Robert blinked, confused. What are you talking about? I just need to process a contract termination. Colonel Wright stood, the chair scraping the floor. Mr. Hutchinson, do you know what TS/SCI clearance means? Top secret something, Robert said, irritation rising. I know she has clearance. So do others on the team. Top secret/sensitive compartmented information, the colonel said. It's not just a clearance level. It's access to specific programs. Ms. Hartwell isn't just a contractor. According to this documentation, she holds the only active clearance for 3 separate compartmented programs this facility runs. Not 1. 3. He set the folder down and pointed. She's the primary systems integrator for Project Sentinel, the secondary failsafe administrator for Operation Watchtower, and the sole certified technician for the Aegis protocol implementation at this site. Robert's confidence wavered. Then we'll get her clearances transferred. It's just paperwork. It's not just paperwork, Colonel Wright said, an edge creeping into his voice now. These clearances take 18 months to 3 years to obtain, require presidential-level approval for compartmented access, and demand continuous presence on the programs. You can't transfer them. You can't reassign them. And you absolutely cannot have a gap in coverage. He tapped another line. Do you see this notation? Critical infrastructure designation. Do you know what that means? Robert said nothing. It means if this facility loses its certified operator for these systems, federal funding is suspended pending security review. Not paused. Suspended. Every contract tied to these programs enters immediate review status. Project Sentinel alone represents $42 million in annual funding. This facility's other classified work totals another $68 million. You're looking at a complete operational shutdown. The room had gone very quiet. I could hear the ventilation. A phone ringing distantly in another office. Robert's face had gone from pale to ashen. That can't be right. Why wasn't I briefed on this? You were, I said quietly. Both men turned to me. I sent you a memorandum 3 weeks ago outlining the federal requirements for my position and the consequences of contract disruption. I copied your assistant and the HR compliance officer. Robert's eyes shot to his laptop, fingers clicking, searching. I knew exactly what he'd find if he looked in the right folder. A memo that had been detailed, professional, and explicit about the regulations governing my work. I get hundreds of emails, he said defensively. This was marked priority, critical, and flagged for response, I replied. I also requested a meeting to discuss it. That request was denied. Colonel Wright picked up his phone. I need to make some calls. Mr. Hutchinson, I strongly suggest you do not process Miss Hartwell's termination. In fact, I suggest the opposite. He stepped out, already dialing, his voice dropping into clipped, urgent tones as the door swung shut. Robert and I sat alone. He stared at his laptop, then the folder, then me. You could have mentioned this when I started the meeting, he said. You didn't ask, I replied. You scheduled a 12-hour notice meeting, provided no agenda, and opened by terminating my contract. I responded by handing the relevant documentation to the appropriate authority. That's protocol. This is, he gestured vaguely. This is a miscommunication. No, I said, keeping my voice even and factual. This is what happens when someone makes decisions about systems they don't understand. You assume that because I'm a contractor rather than a federal employee, my position was flexible. You didn't review the specific requirements of my work. You didn't consult the program managers. You didn't check the federal regulations. You made an assumption, and it was wrong. He looked ready to argue when the door opened and Colonel Wright stepped back in, expression grim. I just spoke with the program director at DCSA. They're sending an emergency assessment team. ETA 4 hours. Until they arrive and complete their review. All classified operations at this facility are suspended. Mr. Hutchinson, you need to brief your chain of command immediately. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. What do I tell them? Tell them you attempted to terminate the contract of the only cleared systems integrator for 3 critical infrastructure programs without consulting federal authorities, and that we're now in crisis containment mode. The colonel's tone stayed perfectly flat. And tell them to have legal standing by. Robert stepped out, phone at his ear, voice already climbing in stress. Colonel Wright turned to me. Miss Hartwell, I apologize for this situation. You didn't create it, sir. No, but I should have caught it sooner. I've been reviewing contract personnel lists, but I didn't cross-reference them against critical infrastructure designations. He paused. How long have you known he was planning this? I suspected after his second week when he started asking about contractor optimization. I knew for certain when my meeting request was denied, and I saw similar termination meetings scheduled for 3 other specialized contractors. The others, do they hold federal designations? One does. Jackson Reeves, the cryptographic systems auditor. He holds dual program clearance. Colonel Wright closed his eyes briefly. Did Hutchinson terminate him too? Meeting scheduled for Friday. The colonel made another call. When he hung up, he gestured for me to sit, and I did. Walk me through something, he said. How did someone with Hutchinson's background get authority over federally designated positions? TechCorp's corporate structure separates commercial and defense divisions, but regional directors oversee both for administrative efficiency, I explained. It's supposed to be a cost-saving measure. The defense contracts carry federal oversight, but day-to-day management, HR, facilities, contract administration, runs through the regional level. So corporate efficiency created a gap where someone without security clearance could make decisions about cleared personnel. Exactly. Federal program managers oversee the work itself, but employment contracts run through corporate. Robert has hiring and firing authority within his region. The system assumes he'll consult with program managers before making changes. He didn't. The colonel shook his head slowly. That's a structural disaster waiting to happen. It's happened before, I said. TechCorp lost a facility in Colorado 2 years ago over something similar. Different regional director, same root issue. Terminated a critical position without understanding the federal implications. The facility lost its certification and had to shut down. 40 people lost their jobs. And corporate didn't fix the structural problem? They issued new guidelines. More memos, more training modules. I shrugged. But they never changed the fundamental authority structure. Regional directors still have final say on personnel. We sat in silence a moment. Through the window, people moved across the parking lot, heading to their cars for early lunch breaks, oblivious that their jobs had just gone uncertain. What happens now? I asked. DCSA sends their team, assesses the situation, determines whether the facility can maintain its security certification, Colonel Wright said. Best case, they confirm you're staying, confirm the programs are secure, and operations resume. Worst case, they pull the certification and this facility closes. And Robert? That depends on corporate and federal response. At minimum, he's removed from oversight of defense contracts. At maximum, the colonel grimaced. Compromising critical infrastructure through negligence can carry federal penalties. The door opened. Robert came back in, phone still in hand, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 15 minutes. Corporate wants a full briefing in an hour. They're sending the general counsel and the defense division VP. They asked, he swallowed. They asked if we've contained the situation. Have we? Colonel Wright looked at me. Everyone waited. It was a strange moment. The person fired 20 minutes earlier now holding every card. My contract is still active? I asked. Robert nodded quickly. Absolutely. The termination is rescinded. Fully rescinded. And the other contractors you were planning to cut? He hesitated. I need to review. Mr. Hutchinson, Colonel Wright cut in. I suggest you rescind any termination plans for personnel holding federal clearances until DCSA completes their review. In fact, I suggest you give Ms. Hartwell a full list of every personnel change you were considering, and let her flag which positions carry federal implications. Robert looked like he wanted to push back, But he just nodded. There's something else, I said. The reason you were looking at contractor costs in the first place, you're under pressure to reduce expenses, correct? Regional budgets are tight, Robert admitted. Corporate wants a 10% reduction in operational costs across all divisions. And you thought cutting high-salary contractors was the solution. Contractors cost more per hour than employees. It seemed logical. It would be, I said, if you were running a commercial operation. But defense contracts work differently. The federal government provides funding specifically allocated for specialized positions. You can't cut those positions and pocket the savings. The funding is tied to the work being performed by qualified personnel. Cut the personnel, lose the funding. Robert sank into a chair. So the cost reduction target is impossible. For defense contractors, yes. The savings have to come from efficiency improvements, process optimization, overhead reduction, not personnel cuts. At least not specialized cleared personnel. I paused. That was in the memo I sent you. He put his head in his hands. Colonel Wright's phone buzzed. He checked it and stood. DCSA team is ahead of schedule. They'll be here in 90 minutes. Mr. Hutchinson, prepare a complete briefing on this incident. Ms. Hartwell, document your current program status and verify all security protocols are intact. Yes, sir, I said. As the colonel left, Robert looked up at me. Why didn't you just tell me this before, when I first started reviewing budgets? I tried, I said simply. I sent the memo. I requested a meeting. You declined. Then I tried to raise it during the general staff meeting 2 weeks ago. And you said contractor concerns could be handled through appropriate channels. I used the appropriate channels. You didn't engage with them. I thought you were just trying to protect your job. I was, I admitted. But not just my job, everyone's jobs. This facility employs 230 people. If we lose federal certification, they all lose their positions. So yes, I was protecting my job, but I was also trying to prevent exactly what's happening right now. He stared at the table. What do I do? It wasn't really my place to advise the man who tried to fire me an hour earlier, but I thought of my parents' community center, of how they'd handle someone who'd made a mistake. Be honest in your briefing, I said. Don't minimize it, don't make excuses. Explain that you didn't understand the federal contract structure, and that you've learned from this. Show them you're taking steps to prevent it from happening again. And listen to the people who do understand these systems. Robert nodded slowly. Will you stay after all this? That depends, I said. Am I staying because I'm critical infrastructure you legally can't remove? Or because TechCorp values the work I do, and wants to support it properly? Both honestly, he offered. That's honest at least. I stood and gathered my folder. I'll prepare the documentation for DCSA. We'll see what corporate and federal decide, and then I'll make my decision. I left Robert in the conference room and returned to my office. A small, secure workspace in the classified section, requiring badge access and biometric verification. The space itself was a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, built to prevent electronic eavesdropping or data leakage. Inside sat 3 computer systems, each isolated from the others, each tied to a different secure network. My work involved integrating data from multiple classified sources, ensuring different defense systems could communicate without opening security vulnerabilities. Complex, detailed work demanding fluency not just in the technology, but in the federal regulations governing every piece of it. I started documenting the current status of each program. Project Sentinel ran smoothly. The integration I'd completed the previous month had actually boosted system efficiency by 18%. Operation Watchtower needed a few updates, nothing critical. The Aegis protocol implementation sat in maintenance mode, all systems green. Everything exactly as it should be. If DCSA found any gaps, any protocol violations, the situation would get far worse. But I'd been meticulous. That was the job. Around 11:30 my desk phone rang, internal line. Sophia Hartwell, I answered. Sophia, it's Amanda. Amanda Park, the facility's senior HR administrator. Can you come to conference room A? Corporate is on a video call, and they want to speak with you. On my way. Conference room A was the largest, equipped for video conferencing with the corporate office in Boston. When I arrived, the screen showed 4 people: Gregory Walsh, General Counsel; Diana Richardson, Defense Division VP; Thomas Bellamy, Chief Operating Officer, and a woman in her 50s I didn't recognize, sharp-eyed, an Air Force pin on her lapel. Robert sat at the table looking miserable. Colonel Wright sat beside him, ramrod straight. Amanda gestured for me to sit, and I did. "Miss Hartwell," Gregory Walsh began, "thank you for joining us. I'm Greg Walsh, TechCorp's General Counsel. I believe you know Diana Richardson, and this is our COO Thomas Bellamy. The 4th person on this call is," he caught himself. "Apologies. Brigadier General Kimberly Frost, DCSA Program Security Director." My posture straightened automatically. A brigadier general on the call meant this had escalated further than I'd realized. "Miss Hartwell," General Frost said, her voice crisp and authoritative, "I've reviewed your clearance file and your program documentation. I need you to answer some questions directly and honestly. Your security clearance protects you in these matters, so speak freely." "Yes, ma'am." "Were you given any indication that your contract termination was being considered prior to this morning's meeting?" "No direct indication, ma'am. I had concerns based on Mr. Hutchinson's general comments about contractor costs and his questions about personnel optimization. That's why I sent the memorandum 3 weeks ago outlining the federal requirements for my position." "And that memorandum was ignored?" "It received no response, and my request to meet about it was declined." General Frost's expression didn't move, but something flickered in her eyes. "When did you become aware that your position held a critical infrastructure designation?" "I was informed when I received the designation 14 months ago, ma'am. DCSA sent the formal notification, and I was briefed on the additional reporting requirements and security protocols." "And you've maintained those protocols?" "Yes, ma'am. Monthly status reports, quarterly security assessments, immediate notification of any potential vulnerabilities, all filed on schedule." She nodded. "I've seen them. They're thorough." Her attention shifted to the corporate executives. "Mr. Walsh, Ms. Richardson, Mr. Bellamy, we have a significant problem. This facility holds certifications for 9 separate classified programs, representing approximately $110 million in annual federal funding. 3 of those programs, representing $42 million, are currently at risk because of this incident." Diana Richardson leaned forward. "General Frost, we've rescinded the termination. Ms. Hartwell's contract is secure. Can't we move forward on that basis?" "Not immediately," General Frost said. "The issue isn't only whether Ms. Hartwell stays. The issue is that your corporate structure allowed this situation to occur at all. A regional director without security clearance, without understanding of federal contracts, was given authority to terminate critical infrastructure positions. That's a fundamental security vulnerability." Thomas Bellamy spoke up. "General, our regional directors manage administrative functions, not program content. The oversight is supposed to be separate." "Supposed to be," General Frost repeated. "But in practice, Mr. Hutchinson scheduled a termination meeting, prepared termination paperwork, and attempted to execute it without any consultation with program managers or federal liaisons. The safeguards in your system failed." The executives traded glances. Gregory Walsh cleared his throat. "What's DCSA's recommendation?" "We're sending a full assessment team to evaluate not just this incident, but TechCorp's entire personnel management structure for cleared positions. That review will take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, any personnel changes affecting cleared positions require approval from both DCSA and the relevant program managers. If we find systemic problems, TechCorp's facility certifications will be suspended pending remediation." Diana Richardson paled. "Suspended? That would shut down our defense operations entirely." "Yes," General Frost said flatly, "which is why I suggest you take this very seriously." A long pause. Finally, Thomas Bellamy spoke. "General Frost, we'll cooperate fully with your assessment. Mr. Walsh will coordinate our response. You have my personal commitment that we'll address any structural issues you identify." "I appreciate that, Mr. Bellamy." Her gaze shifted to me. "Ms. Hartwell, do you have any security concerns about continuing your work during this assessment period?" It was a loaded question. Say yes and risk additional scrutiny, Say no while harboring real concerns and I'd be violating my own obligations. No immediate security concerns, ma'am, I said carefully. All programs are operating within normal parameters. However, I'd recommend any planned system updates or modifications be delayed until the assessment concludes, to avoid any potential compliance questions. Agreed. Coordinate with Colonel Wright on a holding status for non-critical updates. She turned back to corporate. We'll have our assessment team on site Monday morning. I expect full access to personnel files, management structures, and policy documentation. Coordinate with my office on facilities. Understood, Gregory Walsh said. The call ended. For a moment no one in the room moved. Then Diana Richardson's voice came through the speaker again. She'd stayed connected after muting. Sophia, can you stay on a moment? Robert, Colonel Wright. Thank you, we'll be in touch. A clear dismissal. Robert left quickly, relief and worry warring on his face. Colonel Wright caught my eye, gave a small nod, and departed. Amanda checked that the door was shut and the room secure, then left too. I sat alone with the screen showing 3 executives. Sophia, Diana Richardson began, her tone shifting, less formal now, more direct. I need to understand something. This memo you sent Robert. Did you send copies to anyone else? I copied his assistant and the HR compliance officer as I mentioned. I also filed a copy in the secure program documentation system, per protocol. But you didn't escalate to corporate. No, ma'am. The reporting structure routes facility-level issues through the regional director. I followed the structure. Thomas Bellamy leaned in. Even when the regional director was the problem? I didn't know he was the problem until he ignored the memo, I said. I thought I was giving him information he needed. When he didn't respond, I assumed he'd reviewed it and decided a meeting wasn't necessary. I didn't know he was planning terminations until the meeting was scheduled yesterday. Gregory Walsh studied me through the screen. You had 12 hours notice for that meeting. You prepared documentation, brought your clearance papers, knew exactly how to handle the situation. That's not a panic response. That's preparation. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent most of Tuesday evening making sure I had everything I might need. I prepared for multiple possibilities, I said. Best case, the meeting was a routine administrative review. Worst case, termination. I brought documentation relevant to either scenario. And you knew exactly who to hand it to, Diana Richardson observed. Not Robert, the military liaison. Colonel Wright has federal authority over program security. Mr. Hutchinson has corporate authority over contracts. For a matter touching both, yes, ma'am. I knew who needed to see the documentation first. Thomas Bellamy smiled slightly. You outmaneuvered him. I followed protocol, I corrected. There's no regulation saying I have to make it easy for someone to violate federal security requirements, even if that someone is trying to fire me. Gregory Walsh laughed, a short bark. Fair point. He sobered. Sophia, I'll be blunt. This situation is a disaster for TechCorp. We're looking at a federal investigation, possible suspension of operations, and significant reputational damage in the defense contracting community. But you handled it exactly right. You tried to prevent it, documented your efforts, and when it happened anyway, you responded appropriately. Thank you, sir. Which brings me to the real question, Diana Richardson said. Are you going to stay? I took a breath. That depends on what happens next. Explain. Right now I'm valuable because I'm critical infrastructure, and removing me would trigger federal penalties. That's not the same as being valued for the work I do. If TechCorp fixes its structural problems, implements real oversight for cleared positions, and ensures this can't happen again, then yes, I'd consider staying. If this becomes a temporary patch that reverts to the same problem in 6 months, then no. I'll fulfill my contract obligations, help transition my responsibilities if possible, and move to an organization that takes federal security seriously. The 3 executives traded glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. What if we offered you a different role? Thomas Bellamy asked. I blinked. Sir, this incident exposed a gap we didn't know we had, he continued. We need someone who understands both the federal requirements and the corporate operations. Someone who can bridge that gap and make sure regional directors stop making decisions about things they don't understand. Diana Richardson picked up the thread. We're creating a new position, Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. Corporate level, reporting directly to me. Your responsibility would be oversight of all personnel decisions affecting cleared positions across every TechCorp facility. You'd review proposed changes, ensure federal compliance, and serve as liaison between corporate management and program security. My mind raced. A significant promotion from individual contributor to director, from single facility to corporate scope. You'd still maintain your clearances and program access, Diana added. But you'd also have authority to intervene when situations like this arise. Think of it as institutionalizing what you did today, making sure someone with your knowledge is always in the loop. Gregory Walsh leaned in. To be clear, Sophia, this isn't a bribe to keep quiet about what happened. The federal assessment is happening regardless. This is us recognizing we need this function. And you've proven you understand it better than anyone we have. What about Robert? I asked. Mr. Hutchinson will be reassigned to a purely commercial region, Diana said. No defense contracts, no cleared personnel. He'll have opportunities to rebuild his career, just not in an area where he can compromise federal programs. And the structural changes? We're implementing a policy requiring federal liaison approval for any personnel changes affecting cleared positions, Gregory Walsh said. We're adding security compliance training for all regional directors and creating your position to ensure ongoing oversight. Those changes will be permanent, codified in corporate policy, and included in our federal compliance documentation. It was more than I'd expected. Actual structural change instead of more memos. I'd want to review the full job description, I said. And I'd want to be involved in developing the new policies, not just enforcing them. Thomas Bellamy smiled. Sophia, if you take this job, you'd be writing those policies. That's half the point. Then yes, I said. Pending review of the specifics, I'm interested. Diana Richardson nodded, satisfaction plain on her face. Greg will send you the draft job description by end of day. We'll formalize everything once DCSA completes their assessment. We want them to see we're serious about fixing this. In the meantime, continue your current work, cooperate with the assessment team, and start thinking about what policies we need. Understood. One more thing, Thomas Bellamy said. Thank you. You could have let this blow up much worse. You could have gone straight to DCSA yourself, triggered the investigation without giving us any warning. You didn't. You tried to work within the system first. That matters. The call ended. I sat alone in the conference room a moment, processing it all. 24 hours earlier I'd been a contractor worried about possible termination. Now I was looking at a director-level position with corporate-wide authority. It felt surreal. My phone buzzed, a text from Jackson Reeves. Heard there was excitement this morning. You okay? I smiled and typed back. Meeting Friday is canceled. You're safe. Long story. His reply came fast. Beer and long stories. Tonight. Definitely. I gathered my things and headed back to my office. Walking through the facility, I noticed people watching me. Word had clearly spread that something significant had happened, even without details. Amanda Park caught up with me in the hallway. Sophia, quick question. What should I tell people who are asking about this morning? The truth, I said. There was a misunderstanding about contract requirements that's been resolved. Operations continue as normal. DCSA is conducting a routine assessment to ensure compliance. That's it. That's it. Anything more specific involves classified program details or personnel matters. Neither should be discussed casually. She nodded. Fair enough. And you're okay. I'm fine, I assured her. Actually better than fine, but I can't talk about it yet. Understood. Let me know if you need anything. As she left, I considered how differently this could have gone. If Robert had succeeded in terminating my contract, if I hadn't had documentation ready, if Colonel Wright hadn't been in that room, the cascading failure could have been catastrophic. Back in my office, I pulled up the secure documentation system and began drafting a detailed incident report. Even though the outcome had been positive, security protocols required documentation of any threat to program integrity, and this qualified. As I wrote, I thought about what the new role would mean: Director of Cleared Personnel Operations, responsible for preventing incidents like this across every TechCorp facility. I'd need to understand not just my own programs, but every classified contract the company held. I'd need to work with regional directors, program managers, federal liaisons, and corporate executives. It was daunting. It was also exactly the kind of challenge I wanted. My parents had taught me that empathy meant understanding people's perspectives, not accepting harm. You could recognize why someone made a mistake while still holding them accountable. You could be kind while enforcing boundaries. Robert had made a mistake born of ignorance and cost-cutting pressure. That didn't excuse it, but it explained it. The appropriate response wasn't to destroy his career. He was being reassigned, given a chance to succeed where he had relevant expertise. But it also wasn't to pretend the mistake didn't matter. Hence the federal assessment and the structural changes. That balance felt right. Around 3 p.m., Colonel Wright stopped by my office. "Got a minute?" "Of course, sir." He sat in the visitor's chair, awkward in his uniform in the cramped space. I wanted to apologize properly. This morning that shouldn't have happened. "You didn't know," I said. "I should have. Part of my job is maintaining oversight of program security, including knowing who holds critical clearances. I've been too focused on technical security, and not enough on personnel security." "Will that be part of the DCSA assessment?" "Probably," he admitted. "But honestly, it should be. We got complacent. The programs run smoothly, the technology works, and we stopped paying attention to the human elements. You almost paid the price for that." "But I didn't," I pointed out. "The system worked. It was messy, it was stressful. But the safeguards caught the problem before real damage occurred." "Barely. Barely is still success in security work," I said. "Every incident that doesn't become a disaster is a lesson in what works and what needs improvement. This one taught us that TechCorp needs better integration between corporate management and federal oversight. Now that lesson becomes policy." Colonel Wright studied me. "Corporate offered you something, didn't they?" I saw Richardson's face on that last call. "I can't discuss it until after the assessment," I said carefully. "But let's say TechCorp is taking the structural problems seriously." He nodded slowly. "Good. You deserve recognition for how you handled this." He stood. "The DCSA team arrives Monday at 0800. They'll want to interview you as part of the assessment. Be as honest with them as you were today." "Always, sir." After he left, I returned to my documentation. The incident report needed precision: facts, timeline, actions taken, outcomes achieved. No editorializing. No blame assignment beyond what the facts showed. By 5, I'd filed the report through the secure system. My regular work for the day was done. I could leave. Instead, I pulled up a blank document and started drafting something else: preliminary recommendations for cleared personnel oversight policy. If I was taking the director role, I wanted to walk in with ideas already in hand. The federal assessment would identify problems. I could start identifying solutions. Key elements: mandatory consultation with federal liaisons before any personnel action affecting cleared positions, regular audits of clearance status against program requirements, training for every manager with cleared personnel reporting to them, clear escalation paths when corporate priorities conflicted with federal requirements. I worked until 6:30, barely noticing the time. When I finally looked up, the office had gone quiet, most people already home. I saved my draft, locked my computers, and headed out. Jackson Reeves met me in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. "So," he said as I approached, "canceled Friday meeting, DCSA assessment team, building buzzing with rumors. Want to explain?" "Over that beer you mentioned," I said. "Somewhere far from the office." We ended up at a quiet bar in Arlington, the kind of place where defense contractors gathered after work but nobody talked shop, because everyone knew everyone else was cleared and operational security mattered. Over drinks, I walked Jackson through what had happened. He listened, expression shifting from concern to disbelief to something like awe. "He actually tried to fire you without checking your clearances," he said when I finished. "He knew I had clearances. He just didn't understand what they meant or why they mattered." I took a sip of my beer. To be fair, the system made it easy for him not to understand. There was no checkpoint requiring him to consult anyone before scheduling that termination meeting. There is now, I'm guessing. There will be. DCSA is going to make sure of it. Jackson shook his head. You know what's wild? You saved that facility. 230 jobs. Hutchinson was going to cut you, probably me, who knows who else. If you'd let it happen, just walked away, the whole place would have lost certification. I thought about it, I admitted. For about 30 seconds this morning. I thought about letting him process the termination and watching it all fall apart. Let him learn the hard way. Why didn't you? Because it wouldn't just hurt him. It would hurt everyone, the federal employees on those programs, the contractors like us, the administrative staff who have nothing to do with classified work but would lose their jobs anyway. Revenge isn't worth that cost. So instead you schooled him in federal regulations and apparently impressed corporate enough to offer you a promotion. I smiled. I can neither confirm nor deny discussions about future positions until after the federal assessment concludes. That's a yes. Jackson raised his glass. Congratulations, whatever it is. We clinked glasses. Can I ask you something? Jackson said after a moment. Why did you prepare those documents? You said you got 12 hours notice. Most people would have just shown up. Habit, I guess. My dad used to say hope is not a plan. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and you'll handle whatever actually happens. When I saw that meeting notice with no agenda, my instinct said something was wrong. So I prepared. Your instincts were right. This time, I acknowledged. I've had plenty of times I overprepared for nothing, but overpreparation wastes a few hours. Underpreparation can cost everything. We talked another hour about work, the industry, the particular insanity of defense contracting where you could be simultaneously essential and expendable depending on who understood your value. Finally, Jackson checked his watch. I should head out. Early morning tomorrow, and if DCSA's coming Monday, I want my documentation pristine. Good idea, I said. I'll do the same this weekend. We paid the tab and headed to the lot. Before we split up, Jackson turned back. Hey, Sophia, when you're running this new cleared personnel oversight thing, remember those of us still in the trenches. Always. Don't let corporate turn you into another clueless manager. I laughed. I promise. That's the whole point, making sure management isn't clueless. Good enough. See you Monday. I drove home through Arlington traffic, mind still churning through the day. My apartment sat in a quiet complex near the courthouse. A one-bedroom that was overpriced but convenient, least when I started at TechCorp specifically so the commute wouldn't drain me. Inside I dropped my bag, changed into comfortable clothes and made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables. While I ate, I pulled out my personal laptop and started researching. If I was taking the Director of Cleared Personnel Operations role, I needed to know how other defense contractors handled this. I searched for articles on security clearance management, personnel oversight in classified programs, incidents similar to what had nearly happened today. There were more of them than I expected, contractors losing certifications, facilities shutting down, programs terminated, often because of personnel management failures. Someone retired without a trained replacement. Someone got fired without anyone realizing how critical their role was. Someone's clearance lapsed because renewal paperwork sat unfiled. The human element was consistently the weakest link in security. But there were success stories too. Companies that had built robust oversight systems, career paths for cleared personnel, institutional knowledge that didn't vanish when people left. Those were the models I needed to study. I took notes until almost midnight, then made myself stop. Tomorrow was Friday. I'd work my normal day, prep for the DCSA assessment, and try to keep some semblance of routine while everything shifted underneath me. Friday morning brought an unexpected email from Robert Hutchinson. Sophia, I owe you an apology. What I attempted yesterday was wrong, and it came from ignorance I should have addressed weeks ago. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you and the risk I created for the facility. I'm glad you're staying, and I hope the new role works out. You'll be excellent at it. Robert. I read it twice. Brief, but it seemed genuine. An apology that didn't make excuses or minimize what had happened. I wrote back. Robert. Thank you for the apology. I appreciate it. I hope your reassignment goes well. And I think you'll thrive in commercial operations. Best of luck. Sophia. Felt like closure. The day passed quietly. Colonel Wright briefed the staff on the upcoming DCSA assessment, framing it as a routine security review. Technically true, even if the reasons behind it weren't. People seemed reassured. Jackson's termination meeting was officially canceled. He sent me a relieved thumbs-up emoji. At 4 p.m., Gregory Walsh sent the Director of Cleared Personnel Operations job description as promised. I read through it carefully, exactly what Diana Richardson had described. Corporate-level position reporting to the Defense Division VP, oversight of all cleared personnel across every facility, authority to review and approve or deny personnel actions, liaison between corporate and federal program management. The salary nearly doubled my current pay. Benefits included relocation assistance if needed, though I'd be based in Arlington. The expectations were steep: quarterly travel to all facilities, immediate response to any personnel security issues, development and implementation of comprehensive oversight policies. A big job may be too big. But I thought about that week, about Robert nearly making a catastrophic mistake with no one there to stop him, about the Colorado facility that had shut down 2 years earlier, about every incident I'd researched the night before. Someone needed to do this job and I was qualified. I sent my formal acceptance to Gregory Walsh, contingent on a successful DCSA assessment. His reply came within minutes. Understood and agreed. Welcome aboard, Director Hartwell. We'll make it official after DCSA clears us. Well done this week, Director Hartwell. That would take some getting used to. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I reviewed every program I touched, verified all documentation, triple-checked every security protocol. By Sunday evening, I felt confident my portion of the DCSA assessment would go smoothly. Monday morning, I arrived at the facility at 7:30. The DCSA team was already there. 5 people, including General Frost herself, setting up in a cleared conference room. Colonel Wright coordinated logistics while Diana Richardson and Gregory Walsh represented corporate. Robert Hutchinson was conspicuously absent, placed on administrative leave during the assessment, standard procedure for anyone tied to the incident under investigation. My interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. When I entered, General Frost sat at the head of the table with 2 other assessors, a technical security specialist and a personnel security analyst. Ms. Hartwell, General Frost began, thank you for your cooperation. This interview is part of our formal assessment of Wednesday's incident and TechCorp's personnel security procedures generally. Your answers will be documented and may be included in our report. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Good. Let's begin. They walked through the entire incident, timeline, documentation, communications, my decision-making. They asked about the facility's security culture, management oversight, whether I'd observed other concerning practices. I answered everything honestly. Yes, there were communication gaps between corporate and program management. No, I hadn't observed other security violations. Yes, I believed the incident stemmed from structural problems rather than intentional misconduct. No, I had no concerns about continuing at the facility if the structural problems were addressed. After 90 minutes, General Frost closed her notebook. Last question, Ms. Hartwell. You've been offered a new position, Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. Do you believe you can be effective in that role while maintaining your current program responsibilities? Short term, yes, ma'am. Long term, I'd need to transition some program responsibilities to other cleared personnel as the director role expanded. But I believe the director position is critical enough to justify that transition. Why? Because this incident was preventable, I said. With proper oversight, Mr. Hutchinson would have known he couldn't terminate my contract before scheduling that meeting. With proper systems, he wouldn't have had the authority to schedule it without consultation. With proper training, he'd have understood the federal implications of his budget pressures. Every piece of this was preventable, but prevention requires someone with the authority and knowledge to implement it. That's what the director role would do. General Frost studied me a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, Ms. Hartwell. That's all we need. I was dismissed. On my way out, I caught a glimpse of their notes. Phrases like comprehensive understanding, appropriate response, and recommend continuation visible on the page. Seemed like a good sign. The assessment team spent the rest of the week at the facility, interviewing staff, reviewing policies, examining documentation. By Friday afternoon they'd finished. Gregory Walsh called an all-hands meeting for 4 p.m. The entire facility gathered in the main conference area, cleared and uncleared personnel alike, everyone anxious for the outcome. General Frost stood at the front, uniform crisp, expression neutral. "I'll keep this brief," she began. "DCSA has completed its assessment of this facility and TechCorp's personnel security procedures. We identified several areas of concern, primarily the structural separation between corporate management and federal program oversight. However, we also found TechCorp has begun implementing corrective measures and has demonstrated commitment to addressing these issues systematically." She paused and the room held its breath. "Therefore, DCSA is maintaining this facility's security certification. All classified programs will continue normal operations. We will conduct a follow-up assessment in 6 months to verify that corrective measures have been fully implemented and are effective." Relief rippled through the room. Jobs were safe, programs would continue. Additionally, General Frost continued, DCSA is recommending TechCorp's new personnel oversight structure be adopted as a best practice model for other defense contractors. Ms. Sophia Hartwell, the Director of Cleared Personnel Operations, will be invited to present this model at the next Defense Security Services Symposium. Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt my face flush. General Frost found me in the crowd. "Ms. Hartwell, your professionalism and adherence to security protocols during this incident prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure. The defense community is better served with people like you in positions of authority. Congratulations on your appointment." The room erupted in applause. Colleagues I worked alongside for months, people who'd barely known my name, all celebrating the outcome. Jackson pushed through the crowd and hugged me. "Director Hartwell, look at you." Amanda Park shook my hand enthusiastically. I knew something good was happening. "This is wonderful." Even Colonel Wright approached, offering a crisp salute I wasn't technically entitled to but appreciated anyway. "Well deserved," he said simply. Diana Richardson pulled me aside as the crowd dispersed. "Sophia, let's meet Monday morning to discuss your transition plan. We want you in the director role officially starting the 1st of next month. That gives you 3 weeks to wrap up your program work and prepare." "Thank you," I managed. "I'll be ready." That evening I called my parents in Ohio. My mother picked up on the second ring. "Honey, we haven't heard from you all week. How are things?" "Things are good, Mom. Really good. I got a promotion." I explained everything: the attempted termination, the federal intervention, the new role. My mother listened, asking occasional questions, my father audible on the extension. When I finished, a pause. "Sophia," my father said, voice warm with pride, "you did exactly what we always taught you. You stood up for what was right, but you did it in a way that protected everyone, not just yourself. That's leadership." "Your new title sounds impressive," my mother added. "But what matters is that you're using it to help people, to make sure others don't face what you faced. That's the work that matters." We talked another hour. Family, the community center, everything and nothing. When I finally hung up, I felt grounded again. The next 3 weeks moved fast. I documented everything about my current programs and trained my replacement, a talented analyst named Morgan Phillips who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity, and began developing the comprehensive oversight policies for my new role. I visited TechCorp's other facilities, meeting regional directors and program managers, learning their specific challenges. I worked with Gregory Walsh's legal team to draft policy language satisfying both corporate and federal requirements. And I prepared my presentation for the Defense Security Services Symposium, distilling everything I'd learned into a model other contractors could adopt. On the 1st of the month, I officially became Director of Cleared Personnel Operations. My new office sat at TechCorp's corporate headquarters in Boston, though I'd spend most of my time traveling between facilities. My first official act was implementing a mandatory consultation process. Any personnel action affecting cleared positions now required federal liaison review before execution. A simple change, but one that would have prevented exactly what Robert had attempted. My second act was creating a quarterly training program for every manager with cleared personnel reporting to them. Understanding federal requirements stopped being optional. It became part of the job. 6 months later, DCSA conducted their follow-up assessment, General Frost leading the team again. The result? Full certification with commendation. TechCorp's personnel oversight system was now the standard other contractors were encouraged to adopt. At the Defense Security Services Symposium, I presented to an audience of 300 security professionals the incident, the near disaster, the systematic changes that prevented it from happening again. During Q&A, someone asked, "What would you say to other contractors who think this kind of oversight is too burdensome?" I thought of Robert, of the 230 people whose jobs had been at risk, of every incident I'd researched where things had gone wrong. "I'd say security isn't burdensome when you understand what you're protecting," I answered. "We're not just protecting classified information. We're protecting the people who work with that information, the programs that depend on their expertise, and the national security mission that relies on those programs. That's not a burden. That's a responsibility. And if we're not willing to take that responsibility seriously, we shouldn't be in this business." The audience applauded. After the presentation, General Frost approached me. "Well done, Director Hartwell. You've turned an incident into an industry improvement. That's rare." "Thank you, ma'am. I had good teachers in crisis management." She smiled slightly. "Keep up the good work. The defense community needs more people who understand that security and humanity aren't opposites. They're complementary." Looking back now, I sometimes think about that Wednesday morning in March, sitting in that conference room, hearing your contract is terminated, making a split-second decision about how to respond. I could have answered with anger, with accusations, with immediate escalation. Instead, I answered with documentation, with protocol, with professionalism. That choice led to everything that followed. Not just my promotion, but genuine systemic change protecting thousands of cleared personnel across multiple facilities. It was never about revenge. It was about accountability, about ensuring mistakes became lessons rather than disasters, about building systems that protected everyone. That's what real payback looks like in the professional world, not destruction but construction. Not tearing down the person who wronged you, but building something better so the wrong can't happen again. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, that work gets recognized and rewarded. But even if it doesn't, it's still worth doing. Because that's what integrity means. If workplace accountability stories matter to you, subscribing helps share these experiences with others who need to hear them. Together, we're building a community that values both professionalism and humanity, and we're working toward that 7,000 subscriber milestone. Thank you for being part of this journey.